I thought that I had this down. How do I start this? This is really hard for me to find let me look at my notes. The first thing I wrote down is number 1, be soft with yourself. Wherever you are on this topic is valid. Okay, let's take my own advice. There's a strong part of me that doesn't want to share this video on YouTube because I want to protect myself. I just feel nervous about judgment, but I'm just going to do it anyway because I already have seen people in the comments of my other videos talk about this. I don't want to be like my parent. I don't want to wind up like my parent. I don't want to have a home like my parent. I see a lot of tendencies that I share with my parent in really wonderful ways, in ways of being able to talk about emotional things like I do with you guys. That's something I really think I was introduced to from the way my parent would talk to me. About home stuff, it feels very sensitive. And that's what I worked on with my therapist last week. Is this a sign? I recently did a podcast with my best friend. It's her podcast that she does with her other friend, and it's called Detached. I'll put a little image of it here so you guys can check it out. I highly recommend it. They talk about alcohol addiction, getting sober, recovery, what that looks like, and just life in general, being a creative person and struggling with being a perfectionist, so on and so forth. It's a great podcast. I did an episode with my best friend, who I love dearly. We were talking about how we both struggled with the fear of winding up like our parents, struggling with either alcohol addiction or struggling with being a hoarder. I can be very clear and say I'm not a hoarder. I don't have the tendency of not wanting to throw things away. It's very easy for me to get rid of things. In fact, I get a little bit of a high when I get rid of something. I'll get into what I'm working on and what I'm struggling with in the present moment, but I want to backtrack even further and go towards what did I struggle with right after moving out of the house. Now, before I get into the details, I really do want to make an intentional statement by saying, if you are struggling in any way with keeping your home clean, finding the energy to maintain the home that you want, and hoarding items or whatever it is, I pass no judgment on you, and you shouldn't pass judgment on yourself either. We pick up things naturally, like other people pick up things from their parents too. It's a very common thing. And in general, I think that a lot of people, even if the childhood trauma isn't hoarding, they don't want to wind up like their parents. They see their parents from a little bit of a more broader perspective, so they can say, I don't like how they hold conversations. I don't like how they self-medicate with drugs. I don't like how they use alcohol. A lot of people struggle with this. It's not just us. But I understand because people don't talk about this so openly. There's so much shame involved with having gone through this and then leaving the home and feeling like you're creating the same situation that you had when you were younger. I totally get it. I know that you'll figure it out. Even if it's not in this moment, if it's in a couple weeks, if it's in a couple months, if it's when you invite someone over and you do a whole power clean of your apartment and that's what gets you back on track, totally fine. Whatever it is, it's fine. Let's just first, before we say, I have to fix it and I have to be perfect, and because we're all sensitive to not having a perfect home. Any noticing of dust or whatever, it feels like it triggers that same sort of feeling, at least for me, that same sort of feeling of what I felt when I was living in that childhood home. I want to give you the space to be sensitive about it, and I want to give myself that same space and say, you know what? I'm going to figure it out, and right now, I want to be soft with myself. So the early tendencies I had when I recently had moved out, the overall things I would struggle with was, how do I maintain my space? So the first apartment I had was with one of my best friends, who still is a very good friend of mine. We had a kitchen and a fridge, fully working kitchen and fridge. It was small, but you could use it. So I wouldn't think to cook, so I would get all these pre-prepared foods and, stuff like that. And I would keep the garbage by my bed when I was done. I wouldn't think to use the communal trash bin. I would just keep it separate, and I would take it out the next day. It wouldn't build up in my room, but I would do the same thing my parent did. And that I worked on a little bit before with my therapist about healing the shame about that. But I just want to be honest. I would never use the living room. I would never use the kitchen. I would just stay in my room. I never thought of it as a communal space. I really just thought I had ownership over my room. And I think I could have enjoyed all the apartments I lived in more if I used more of the space. It was kind of just I'm in my room and this is where I eat and this is where I go on my computer and that's just what I do. It was hard to establish boundaries with my roommates of who's gonna clean the kitchen and who's gonna clean the bathroom. Yeah, I didn't really know how to have that conversation yet, so those kind of things were unsaid. And I really struggled with feeling angry if I felt like I was cleaning up after someone. I would get into intense rage about that. So I would start to passive aggressively keep my own garbage in my own bag and just throw out mine. I think that was maybe a way I tried to make boundaries. I didn't realize what was being triggered by that though. I would struggle a lot with early on in my earlier apartments with going out of my room without makeup on. Really, even if it was just to go to the bathroom, I would just wait until someone wasn't in the living room because I didn't want to be seen going to the bathroom. It was very I had to hide in my house. Even though people knew I was living with them, I just still had to keep hiding. I would keep my room clean for the most part. I struggled a lot, and we'll get more into this later on, with keeping my clothes in my closet. I didn't have a closet when I was younger. All my clothes were on the floor or draped on this chair that was in the room. So I would kind of replicate that scenario. Now, I never thought to invite people over, but if on the off chance they came over, I would go into a frenzy of buying new candles, making sure that it smelled really good. So I would start to clean up the space for my visitors. I think that's how I kind of established the routine of cleaning, was for when people come over. It wasn't just for me. The great thing about acknowledging these things that obviously make me uncomfortable and I feel ashamed about, but nonetheless that I'm acknowledging them, is that I can see what they are and actually work on them and heal them. If I were to deny and just say, no, I'm not like my parent in any way, I'm never going to be like them, I would still have certain habits that I've healed through already because I wouldn't have been able to look at them. I would be too afraid or too ashamed. That, I think, was the first step that allowed me to be okay, there are ways I don't like how I upkeep my home or how I don't upkeep my home. And I want to do it for me. I want to do it because it feels good when it's clean. It feels good when it's organized, and when it feels good when it's not cluttered. So that being said, I'm going to talk about things that I'm struggling with now. I think it's really important to be honest about this, especially with you guys, because my instinct is to say I'm not like my parent in any way. And in a lot of ways I'm not. But of course, in some ways I am, and particularly talking focused around this topic of taking care of space, I want to share them with you all. Do I? I do. I don't even really I had to work on this last week in therapy because I woke up with an immense amount of anxiety. My boyfriend told me that he needed to have one of his friends come over to work with him. And the house wasn't what I wanted it to look like for anyone to come over. And it was the day before they were coming, so I had time to clean, but luckily I had my therapy appointment so I could talk to her about it. I was surprised at how much anger and shame I felt towards myself about the way I have not taken care of my space the way that I want it to be taken care of. This is what I think is happening with me. My experience growing up was, to put it very simply, my parent is a hoarder and my home was dysfunctional. And I felt powerless in that dysfunction. And for whatever reason, for whatever subconscious reason, I create dysfunction in my home to which I feel powerless towards. And only when I get the anxiety from someone coming over do I have the energy to clean it up. Now, obviously, I'm living with someone else, so it's not just, I don't hold myself only accountable, but I hold myself a lot accountable for not taking care of it the way that I want, creating a pattern that's unhealthy for me. It's good that I'm working on it now, though, because I have a better understanding, even now. I haven't lived in my childhood home for 10 years, and this new discovery of all this anger and what I really need to work on and how I really need to maintain my home has just come up in a very intense way, which is great because I've learned, and I would implore you all to learn to find ways in which you can breathe through that so I can really logically handle the situation. A lot of my struggle has been with cleaning the home for someone else, for a visitor, for a person who would look at the home. And a lot of the anxiety that comes from that is I'm starting to wheeze. This happens a little bit when I get anxious, so just ignore it. My anxiety comes because I think they'll look at my home and they'll catch me. I'm just like my parent. They're going to see it and they're going to be able to read it in the dust on the floor, in the corner cupboard that's cluttered, in the unmade bed. Okay, that was a good, well-needed dance break. So much of this fear is based on my image, and I think I got that mindset from my parents and my parent worrying about their image, which I understand because upkeeping an image can feel so painful when you're so sensitive to everything about how someone will view you. So let's do a rundown quickly of what I'm dealing with here. We're renting this apartment right now, so in the corner behind you right now, there's a bunch of posters that I've gotten from several museums around the world that I just don't put up because I don't feel like I'm gonna live here forever, so what's the point? But then why do I have these posters in the corner? It's very weird. Like, making a home permanent feels strange to me. Clothes are something I struggle with, where I try on clothes and I get very insecure and I change my clothes and I don't like this part of my body, so I put this other thing on. And then I put in this back room, where my closet's over here, and there's a couch in this room. I just put the clothes that I am not wearing on the couch, and that obviously piles up, to which makes me so anxious about getting dressed and leaving in the morning. It's a vicious cycle that I'm working on already, though, which is great. All of the closets in my home are filled. They're filled with stuff that we don't need. Now again, I'm living with another person, so I don't have control over everything, but I know that I want to get rid of half of my stuff all the time. And I've seen people write in the comments about this where they say they struggle with OCD, about anxiety about the clutter, and I totally relate. I was talking to my therapist last week, as I said, and I was saying how I feel claustrophobic sometimes. I feel swallowed up. I feel like it's the same feeling as when I was in my childhood home. Keeping the kitchen clean has become a big, important thing for me, and something I've just recently vocalized to my partner, who's very receptive to what I ask for. But before then, it would be very easy for us to have piles of dishes on our little kitchen island thing. We would use all of our dishes until there's no more dishes, and then we'd have to do the dishes, a huge load. That has only shifted recently because I've asked to do them more consistently, because I really value the space of being able to make food for myself, nourishing food for myself. Like, that's a very sacred space now. The one thing that will never get dirty in my home is the bathroom. I will always have my shower clean, the bathtub clean, the sink clean, the toilet bowl clean. Like, everything in that area will always be clean. That's very important to me. My makeup cabinet, I just cleaned it recently. I just gutted it out, but I can't with all this foundations, and that's not me. I have to always keep that area throw stuff away. I don't care if it's a waste of money, it's a waste of space, and that's worse. I can be very hypersensitive to when my home is just a little bit dysfunctional. If there's just some dust on the bookshelf because we don't use that bookshelf often or whatever. And what those tiny little things tell me in my brain, in my triggered brain, is I'm just like my parent. Someone else who maybe didn't experience this trauma that we have, they might look at it and be like, oh, I just gotta dust it when I have the time. It's not as like a daunting, condemning experience. So I'm really trying to soften that for myself, because it makes being productive a little bit more difficult if I'm so triggered about this stuff. The bottom line is we had to self-teach how to keep a home clean. We've had to teach ourselves these things because we didn't have a parent to teach us, either by verbally telling us what to do or by setting an example. I want to get out of the cycle that I've seen, that I've been struggling with, which is someone's coming over, or I just have this random burst of energy and I clean the whole house for hours, deep clean. And then it's wonderful and I love it and I feel great and I sit on the couch, and then things start to get messy again. And I start to think, oh my God, I'm disgusting, I'm horrible. And then I start to want to disassociate from that, so I just go on my phone and scroll, or I do something to take my mind off of it. And then a couple days later, I'm like, oh my God, I hate this house, I hate myself, we have to clean it. In certain moments, I really have learned how to soften it and just enjoy my space. And I'm gonna make a whole playlist, I'm gonna do the dishes, and it's gonna feel really good. And I do enjoy doing the dishes now and cleaning, but it's where does that motivation come from? I want it to come from cleaning the home for me. I don't want it to be where I'm keeping care of my space for someone else. No. I want it to be for me. I want to make it good for me. I want to organize my closet for me, not in the off chance someone by accidentally opens my closet door and sees it. I am where I am, and that's okay. I'm really proud of myself. I feel really good about how I'm handling this, and I want to share that with you all, because what could have happened was I acknowledge these things, and it puts me further into a cycle of I just need to disassociate. I have to avoid this. It's too much for me, and I hate myself, and all this other shame and whatever. But instead, I want to talk about it with you. I want to give you guys a place where we can talk about it honestly and openly without any judgment. And I'm figuring it out. I totally have the mentality to figure it out. And I love that about myself. And I know that from seeing how you all interact with me in the comments and how you write so self-aware about the situation and what you're going through, I know that it feels so daunting, but I have no question of your capability to figure it out and do what feels good for you, which is going to look different than what it looks like for me. All right, I'm sending love to you all. I wish we could do a Q&A, a live Q&A or something where we ask each other questions, and you guys don't have to be on camera, but we could write to each other. On that note, thank you so much for watching. I'm sending love to you all. Until next time. Bye. I'm editing the video right now, and I just did an oracle card reading with this same deck, and I got 2 amazing cards. So I want to read a little bit of their description, and then I'll put all of the description and the pictures at the end so you guys can take screenshots or read it whenever you want, but I'm just going to share a little snippet. So the first card I got was Radical Self-Acceptance. Drawing this card calls for a time of deep reflection. List all the things about yourself that you have ever wished to change. What was it about yourself that you were rejecting, and why? Where did that story come from that suggested something about you was wrong, not good enough, or needed to change? Whose belief was it before it was yours? And then the second one I got was Intention. This card signifies a time to clarify your priorities that uncover your core values. Any choices clashing with these priorities, whether conscious or not, are where you give away your power. They are instances where someone or something else is in control. To live with intention is to live deliberately. Being the master of yourself yields great power, purpose, and responsibility. Self-sovereignty is your divine right and not to be given away or compromised. Okay, I'll see you all next time. Bye.